How far did we get? All the verses chanted? No? Jaya Radha Madhava. Devotees, you can hear me, right? Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha, Girivaradhari, Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana, Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha, Girivaradhari, Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jai Radha Madhava, Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha, Girivaradhari, Jaya Gopijana Vallabha, Girivaradhari, Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana, Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana, Yamunatira Vanachari, Munatira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Okay, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 13, today's text number 7. Chapter is entitled Behavior of a Perfect Person. Nasakshastreshu sajeta nopajiveta jivikam vada vadams tyajet tarkan paksam kamchana samsrayet nasak chastreshu sajeta nopajiveta jivikam vadavadams tyajet tarkan paksam kamcha na samsrayet nasa chastresu sajeta nopa jiveta jivikam vadavadams tyajet tarkan paksam kamcha na samsrayet. Okay, who'd like to try?
Shashreshu sajeta nopajiveta jivakam vadam styajet tarkan aksham kamchana samshrayet.
Nasachastreshu sajeta nopajiveta jivikam vadavadam stayajetarkan paksham kamcha nasamsravet.
Jai. Thank you so much. Not. Asat Sastreshu, literatures like newspapers, novels, dramas, and fiction. Sajeta, one should be attached or should indulge in reading. No. Upajiveta, one should try to live. Jivikam, upon some professional literary career. Vadan, unnecessary arguments on different aspects of philosophy. Tyajet, one should give up. Tarkan, arguments and counter-arguments. Baksham, faction. Kamcha, any. Not. Samsrayet, should take shelter of. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Literature that is useless, that is a useless waste of time. In other words, literature without spiritual benefit should be rejected. One should not become a professional teacher as a means of earning one's livelihood, nor should one indulge in arguments and counter-arguments, nor should one take shelter of any cause or faction. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. A person desiring to advance in spiritual understanding should be extremely careful to avoid reading ordinary literature. The world is full of ordinary literature that creates unnecessary agitation of the mind. Such literature, including newspapers, dramas, novels, and magazines, is factually not meant for advancement in spiritual knowledge. Indeed, it has been described as a place of enjoyment for crows. Tat Vayasam Tirtham. Anyone advancing in spiritual knowledge must reject such literature. Furthermore, one should not concern oneself with the conclusions of various logicians or philosophers. Of course, those who preach sometimes need to argue with the contentions of opponents, but as much as possible, one should avoid an argumentative attitude. In this connection, Srila Madhvacharya says, Aprayojana paksham na samsrayet, na prayojana pakshi syam, na vrita sisya, bandhakrit, na kodasina sastrani, na virudhani kabhayaset, na vayak hiya yo pajjiveta, na nisidhan samma charet evam bhuto yatir yati tat eko sarano harim. There is no need to take shelter of unnecessary literature or concern oneself with many so-called philosophers and thinkers who are useless for spiritual advancement. Nor should one accept a disciple for the sake of fashion or popularity. One should be callous to these so-called shastras, neither opposing nor favoring them. And one should not earn one's livelihood by taking money for explaining Shastra. A sannyasi must always be neutral and seek the means to advance in spiritual life, taking full shelter under the lotus feet of the Lord. Om Jnanatimrandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmitam Yana Tasmai Shri Gurve Namah. Panchakalpatrubhyascha kripa sindhureva cha patitanam pavanabhyo vaishnavabhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasti Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So another very nice verse, very instructive verse, but let's discuss, some practicalities, how we can apply it in our day-to-day lives. The verse seems to be very, very clear. So let's start with the first question. How many of you have looked at your phones today? Oops. How many of you have already consumed some of the information that you didn't actually need for today? Maybe the news, maybe weather, maybe sports, the famous, infamous Facebook, emails, advertisements, some political drama that's going on currently. So maybe the next question to ask then is, that information that we consumed, how much of that information will actually matter in 1, 2, 3, even 4, 5 years from now? So in this verse, one of the takeaways I was getting was that, not every piece of information deserves access to our consciousness. So if we read it again, we can see that, there's many angles. You can just take it literally and say that, not this, not that. Anything mundane that, doesn't have Krishna in it, or anything connected with Krishna, is useless literature. But then another aspect is that we need to contemplate is, there's, of course, great capacity of our minds, information, memory, so many things are there. But we should be more mindful about whatever we're reading or consuming, or even hearing some katha that is not, Krishna katha. That if we look at it from the point of view, does this reading, hearing, deserve access to my consciousness? So the idea is, we should not turn this verse into phones are bad, newspapers are bad, internet is bad, modern life is bad. Yes, to some degree, we can, agree on this. But, we also see the flip side of that. If we say phones are bad, then we're not utilizing it properly, because, phones can be used to hear Srimad Bhagavatam, to read Srimad Bhagavatam. It can be used for communicating with other devotees and, hearing Krishna Katha. It can be used, like we do on the farm, for managing the farm activities. It's our main means of communication on the farm. It can be used as a means for checking the weather, to know when we should go plow the ground, when we don't want to plow the ground. Like, this morning it's very, very wet, no plowing. So I could have planned that yesterday for today's activities, that yes, it's going to rain tonight. I should not schedule plowing, early in the morning. So many other uses can be there of the same phone. So we can't just say the phone is bad. No, how are we utilizing it? So we see that, this very same phone can either consume our consciousness in a Krishna conscious way, or it can also consume our consciousness in a mundane way. So what's the point? The point is, the object is not the issue. It's how attached are we to our phones, and for what purposes we use it. So this verse actually is a discussion about the behavior and consciousness of a serious renunciant. And I was thinking that how many of us are really renounced? So we see that, the main principle being discussed here is, and, in general, the Bhagavatam and so many other, Vedic literatures is giving us the ideal standard. And it is our job as sadhakas, practicing bhakti yogis, to gradually move towards that highest standard that's given in the Bhagavatam. So, no reason to take things out of context. We all understand that advancement in spiritual life is going to happen according to our own realizations. And, if we don't have realization about something, we can mechanically follow some standards, some injunction. But, we've heard also about how many devotees have fallen down along the paths, so-called, seriously advanced devotees, in some cases, according to our perception. So if we understand, why is that the case? And, without finding fault and criticizing others, we can understand our advancement is only to the extent of our practical realization of these different principles. So, we understand the process, very simply put, that, at first we try to find those interested persons who are interested in spiritual life, who have some inclination, are very, very thoughtful, but just haven't, had exposure or given it, a second thought. Maybe they were thinking about it, but had nobody to share it with. Their questions, their realizations even sometimes. So we find these interested persons, and then, we introduce them to Krishna consciousness. So this is the beginning sadhika stage. And so then gradually, as we make spiritual advancement, as we chant, as we associate with other advanced devotees, we gradually, steadily make progress on this sadhika platform. And then, gradually one becomes more and more advanced to the highest level of the ideal standard. So we understand we are spiritual beings undergoing, this material experience in the material world. But originally, our original constitution is not material. And so, it's not that once you come to Krishna consciousness, you need to immediately, become to the Paramahamsa platform. No, actually, in one sense, that is discouraged because we understand that there is a very artificial process. The bhakti process is designed to gradually make advancement whilst engaging in the devotional service of the Lord. This is the best means to make spiritual advancement, that we gradually raise ourselves to the ideal standard. So, of course, all these things are specifically mentioned here: newspapers, dramas, magazines, novels. But again, it's said we should be avoided. So the understanding, as I was pointing out, is that rather than saying not this, not that, not this, not that, we should see according to our own place, our own realization, our own, adhikar for that matter, where we are at and what our goal of life is. And if it is to gradually advance spiritually, then we need to slowly disassociate ourselves with, all of these things: watching movies, going to cinemas, reading mundane subject matter. Of course, if one is studying, medicine, studying science, to become a lawyer, there is so much of mundane stuff that needs to happen. But at the same time, we need to look on a deeper level to see how it's affecting our consciousness. If what we're reading makes us, angry, makes us more envious, makes us fearful, sometimes makes us lusty, depressed, then we should take notice of these things. How is what I am reading affecting my consciousness? And depending on the time of day that we are reading these things, also has a greater impact. Reading all of this stuff early in the mornings, impacts our entire day for that matter. One becomes depressed, sad, from what they have consumed. or occupied in their consciousness with whatever activity they were performing. So we need to be mindful of what we're consuming, occupying space within our consciousness. And that's more of a question. Yes, some things one can argue is a definite no, the four regulative principles. And gradually, as we practice Krishna consciousness, we can understand why these four regulative principles is just a plain no. But as we understand, we will realize that these four regulative principles also has an effect on our consciousness. This is why we do it. So the more mature question to ask is, what is going to be the effect of whatever we're thinking about or proposing to engage in? And so when one is considering how to utilize, their cell phones, for that matter, you can, divide all these tasks that you use your phone up into different categories. Some things are necessary. Like for us here on the farm, using the cell phone is most times necessary for work. It can be necessary for communicating with family, for, general appointments related to the farm. Of course, we understood that another category can be that, it can be used for education, reading, hearing Shastra, doing some, useful research as far as Shastra is concerned, or your farm services. Then the other side to utilizing the phone is for entertainment, for, sports, keeping, abreast of who's the winning basketball team, and, in general, non-devotional music. And then, of course, we spoke about that it can be used to consume things that agitate the mind, gossip, endless political arguments, as we can see in today's world. It can be used for pornography. Can be used for envy, and then it can also be used for there's a technical term out there with all the tech people, doomsday scrolling. And this can consume so much of time. So if we can divide what the phone is being used for in these different categories, then we can see whether the phone is having a positive effect on us or negative. One of the big mistakes devotees make as they come to Krishna consciousness is to demand zero entertainment. And this one, of course, is a very controversial one. Some devotees may share that yes, this is the standard from the beginning to the end, whereas others may take it as a gradual process. I was seeing so many nice families that also go to the movies, go to the cinemas, but all of their children are Krishna conscious, very, very Krishna conscious, very, very balanced in so many different ways. So this becomes the perplexing argument. Have these children, for that matter, been properly trained? Watching the basketball game, watching the cricket match, and so forth. Are these completely banned, zero when one becomes a devotee? No, every family, every individual is very, very unique, and we need to balance things out. And I'm in no way advocating that, one has to do these things. Like I said, everybody is very, very unique in their practice of Krishna consciousness. But like this verse is pointing out, here's the highest ideal standard, and we want to gradually make spiritual advancement to get to this level of realization. Because as one advances spiritually, then one can understand these things in proper perspective. It's not that, none of our sannyasis, very advanced sannyasis in ISKCON, don't know what's going on in the world. No, they travel through airports. They need to know, what's the new laws, that seem to be lately implemented, without any notice. So some practical tests that we can run, in whatever activity we are participating in. So very, very practical tests we can use to ascertain that, if I'm watching something, for example, watching the baseball game, can I stop halfway, in the game and, go do something else? So then the question we can ask is, if you can put it down and, just go away and do something else, then maybe you're not completely attached to it. But if you, cannot stop watching and, insist that, no, I just have to watch it right to the end, if you're completely attached to the game, to the outcome of the game, to whichever team wins, then one can understand, this kind of information is actually using me. So the question is, am I just consuming something, or is, on the flip side, whatever it is, using me? How attached am I? Am I being used, or am I using the device, or whatever it is, to, participate? So very important distinctions. So we understand from this process of Krishna consciousness, for example, one can have so many attachments, eating foodstuffs, delicious, tasty foodstuffs, lots of Gita, Nagari, paneer steaks, all of these things are very, very nice, palatable dishes. But we understand if it is not offered to Krishna, for example, then it, becomes not so useful in our life. That yes, some nutrition may be there, but if we're not offering our food stuff to Krishna, then the actual spiritual benefit is not even there. So the idea is how to develop a higher taste and, only consume Krishna prasadam, for example. That yes, initially, a lot of us weren't devotees. We were just eating for, getting some nourishment from whatever we were eating. But then as we became devotees, we could understand this principle of, offering our foodstuffs to Krishna and then having the remnants. This is the higher taste. So similarly, engaging in this process of bhakti yoga, we understand, helps us to develop a higher taste, not just for prasadam, but for everything, for reading, for hearing, spiritual subject matter. Then this is how we want to live our life, just having a higher taste for everything. Okay, we want to finish early today, 7:45. We want to do Guru Puja because today is the first day of Julan Yatra. So we'll be swinging the deities just after greetings at 8 o'clock. So we'll take Sri Radha Damodar out for Julan Yatra celebrations. So there's, so much more that we can go on talking about this verse. But maybe I'll stop there. Anyone wants to add comments, questions, corrections?
Hare Krishna.
Oh, Ranga.
Haribol, thank you for your class. It's very thought-provoking. Yeah, gives me a lot to think about. I think my biggest takeaway is not all information deserves access to my consciousness. That's a great thing to keep in mind, at least for myself. I'm trying to think what I want to share. I'll just, I guess the last point ish you were making regarding like prashadam, and of course we can apply that to other things, just like sources of pleasure that you can see in the world, sources of enjoyment. It's nice to think about how the process of bhakti and training, especially in an ashram setting. I won't get into the details because many times that's not done in so many great ways across ashrams, but somehow or other you get training in, renunciation. Tapo divyam putrakayena sarvam. Like that's the ashram motto many times. And of course, at least myself being out of an ashram setting now, living closer to family, living in a city, not being as close to a devotional community that I connect with as much, that kind of thing. Those kinds of sources and presentations of enjoyment are everywhere. But it's nice to know, at least for myself, that those things can't sway me because of the power of devotional training, devotional service, devotional topics, and just the process itself. So that's just kind of one of the little tidbits that gave me some thinking to do. But again, thank you for your class. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that. Yes. Yes, Krishna is very, very kind in so many ways. And, he's able to somehow or the other, even though there's 8,400,000 species alone, is able to tailor make so many things just for our own consciousness, practical realization. So yes, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Anyone else wants to share?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Prabhu.
Thank you for your class. I'm sorry there's not more time. As you say, there's so much we could discuss on this verse. We didn't touch on the topic of arguments, philosophical argument. There's a lot to understand. There is the verse makes reference to Tarko Pratishta, which is a type of philosophical argument that is inconclusive. And so it's a waste of time. One could argue endlessly on certain topics and never reach a conclusion. And there are individuals who will engage in such arguments out of false ego, just to try to defeat someone else. So the argument itself is a waste of time. The motivation is a mistake. And so there's many places in Shastra that advise against this kind of argument. But then there is a type of philosophical argument that is encouraged. And there are also many examples of that. Srila Prabhupada himself used to engage his disciples in philosophical arguments. he would take one side and he would have the disciples take the other side, and they would argue on a philosophical point. Then they would switch sides and practice arguing from the opposite perspective. And he encouraged the devotees to engage in such philosophical argument in order to learn very deeply both sides of the argument, so that they would be well equipped to defeat opposing forces. Particularly devotees are expected to vehemently oppose false philosophical ideas such as Mayavad philosophy. But there are other types of argument that are also important to us when we are preaching Krishna consciousness. We present philosophical arguments. It is by philosophical arguments that we persuade someone to take up Krishna consciousness. We present our best logic and reason, and ultimately, Guru, Shastra, Sadhu, we rely upon these solid sources of evidence to support our position. So there is argument that is encouraged, and there is argument that is is not encouraged. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in the Adi Leela famously says that a sincere student should not neglect the discussion of such conclusions concerning philosophy of Krishna consciousness, considering them controversial, for such discussion strengthens the mind. Thus, one's mind becomes attached to Krishna. So there is philosophical argument that is encouraged, but inconclusive arguments are discouraged because they don't lead anywhere. It is not by argument that one can understand Krishna. Krishna is understood only by devotional service. Bhakti-mama vijanati yavanyashasmi tatpataha. One can understand me as I am only by devotional service. In the 18th chapter, we hear Krishna say this 55th verse. So only by devotional service, not by arguments. But nonetheless, there are times when argument is appropriate. So one has to study and learn when it is time to argue and when it should be avoided. Anyway, we're out of time, but
yes. No, I mean, devotees, you can continue online here for a few minutes longer. I mean, I have to keep running because we have to set up the grove and do different things. But yes, on this point of arguments, we see it every day practically in our daily lives. Someone posts something, and then someone disagrees with it, and then you type a response, and then they respond, and you respond, and hours can go on. And what's the result? We've experienced it. I've experienced it, that it just leaves the mind disturbed, thinking about what you're going to write tomorrow. What did we gain from this? And we can just go on and on and on and on. And like we said, what's occupying our consciousness? How did it help us? Did the living entity fall from the spiritual world? Did the jiva fall? Not, sometimes devotees want to go down that route and just keep arguing. Like you're saying, some of these arguments are necessary, some of them are not. And according to our adhikar, I think, according to our own realizations, we should engage or not engage. And there might be more valuable things one can do with their time. So maybe consider that in whatever argument may be going on. Is there better opportunity to use this time with, rather than trying to engage? So of course we understand, as for our Siddhanta, we have to always pass through things, our principles, through Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. And so sometimes devotees get very fanatical in their approach. This is the only way, Prabhupada said, and they'll find, 20 quotes. But little did they do any research to find 20 other ways which Prabhupada said the exact opposite. So spiritual life can be very, very tricky sometimes. So especially, devotees living out there, they pay taxes, they live in society, and, like Mataji was just pointing out, you might be surrounded with, not so many devotees. Then how do you live life? Is it just, being depressed all the time? No, not. You can, turn your situation into something very, very positive. So this is what we need to see, how to turn the different situations into something positive that affects us in a very, very positive way. So I'm going to leave, I'm going to close the class. If you all can please continue discussing. I think, like you said, there's just so much more we can discuss on this verse. And if anybody wants to continue, please continue. Let me go and start decorating. Because it rained last night, we couldn't put the flowers out, so I have to go and start putting these flowers out. And so many things on the Julan Yatra site. So thank you, dear devotee.
Hare Krishna.